If I may, let's go back to the lineage and the seed wars for just a second.
Yeah.
Talk about Isaac and Jacob.
Ooh,
I want to talk about this because you have, it was, again, I always get the names mixed up.
You mean Jacob and Esau?
Jacob and Esau,
Okay,
thank you.
okay.
Isaac being their father, correct? Or no? What's their dad?
Yes,
Isaac, their father.
correct.
So,
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob.
yes, and you have the whole thing of the bloodlines, and you have the whole thing of giving up your birthright.
Right.
In that aspect too. I've heard people talk about a description of, they talk about how the Bible describes Esau. And what he is, what he looks like, smells like even. It's just pure speculation.
Right.
But it's fascinating to think of that because also, correct me if I'm wrong, Esau is the son of Isaac, but not through...
They were twins.
Oh, they were twins. Okay. So that right. I was thinking of something else.
Yeah,
they were twins.
Jacob and Esau were twins.
Yeah, so they were twins.
Esau was the firstborn, but Jacob came out of the womb
grabbing
clutching his heel.
Heel grabber. The heel grabber, yeah.
And it's I just want to bring it up because how does that fit in with the bloodlines and the seed wars and what inevitably becomes the lineage of Christ? Because you have Esau and Jacob, right, who are twins. They're part of that birthright, but Esau gives up his birthright to Jacob.
That's interesting.
I've heard Mr. Timmy talk about how, I'm just going to call him Timmy, how he correlates with that with the Watchers and the angels and man, and how we've already established they are spirits on this earth, evil spirits, and they're always trying to make us stumble and just sabotage the bloodline. How does that work out with Esau giving up to Jacob?
Well,
what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because Jacob really went after that birthright. And you got to admire the tenacity.
Yeah.
Of Jacob. He wanted it.
Yeah, Jacob was like, he knew that there was something for him to get.
He valued it.
You see when he wrestled with God, basically the man who was God told him, "Let me go," and Jacob said, "I won't let you go until you bless me."
Come on.
So Jacob had that front, and he was clutching Esau's heel when he came out of the womb. So from that very moment, from the moment of birth, he knew, he had this sense that there was something that was rightfully his that he needed to take hold of.
It's an identity thing. He knew he was destined for more than he was. Esau didn't.
Yeah, he sold it for soup.
He sold it for soup. That is so important to understand because this really parallels to the Christian walk now. In our culture specifically.
100%.
There's a ton of Christians that are will not get off their rear ends because they don't realize the value of their birthright. And this is, I just love Jacob's tenacity because you don't find it very often in our culture. And I pray Christians have more tenacity than that, even though he was a little shady. Jacob did a few shady things.
Well, it's funny because he got the birthright from Esau, but then he wants Isaac's blessing as well. And that's where it gets a little it's a little shady.
He understood the importance of it, though.
That's correct, yeah.
I
never thought of it that way.
And
honestly.
also,
he searched out a matter.
Also, too, you have to think is, he was interested in making sure that the thing he was after was actually his. So just because, this Jacob and Esau had this private interaction where Esau's like, give me some soup and I'll give you my birthright because I want soup. Now the
future king of Israel, ladies and gentlemen.
Really secure his place as the as having the firstborn birthright, he had to get his father's blessing. And who knows, his father was obviously in kind of a state by this time. So, he had to just make sure he got it.
At all costs.
He already bought it for soup from Esau, but he had to make the birthright from Esau for soup, but he had to make sure he got the blessing from his father to make sure that he had that in like a real physical way, and not just, oh yeah, I have the birthright because I gave my brother some soup, kind of a thing.
There's this really interesting kind of Cain Abel feel to the story when it starts out. And then you kind of see Jacob's human corruption and his finagling and deception. And in fact, his name means liar. Did you know that?
It means usurper.
Usurper. So then he gets to the wrestling moment. And what I love about the Jacob Esau story versus Cain and Abel is it's a beautiful picture of redemption. Because God changes his name. He changes his name from the usurper to Israel.
Yeah.
What does Israel mean, David? Do you remember? I can't remember. It's good. It's like God's beloved or something.
Yeah, I mean it's God's something because it's got that L at the end.
Israel. Yeah, you're right. It's something. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, he changed his name, and that's what God does with all of us.
Yeah.
When we accept him, and sometimes you gotta dig in and you gotta find it, and you gotta put the work in, and you gotta wrestle God a little bit. I heard a pastor say one time, because Jacob limped the rest of his days after he wrestled with God, and I heard this preacher say one time, never trust anyone without a limp. In other words, everyone needs to wrestle with God a little bit, and it's gonna cost you something.
Oh, so Israel means God prevails.
Ooh, that's good. So God prevails, and from usurper to God prevails. I love that, especially because Jacob won the wrestling match. So maybe did God really prevail in that wrestling match? Well, I guess he did anyway.
Well, it's interesting because Jacob wrestles with God, and he tells him, God in human form, essentially, tells him, let me go, and Jacob says no, but then he proceeds to just touch Jacob's hip and puts it out of socket.
Yep, interesting. Fascinating. There's got to be some deeper meaning to that. I need to study that a little more. So I love it. And then Jacob and Esau reconcile.
Yeah, which is beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Oh my gosh.
So it's almost like this beautiful picture of what it could be like when you actually choose to follow God correctly. And it doesn't mean you're perfect, but you turn and repent. Because I believe that's kind of where Jacob got to the end of his life, was this, he figured it out. And God changed his name, and that's what he does when salvation, when our faith meets his grace.
Yeah.
And that's where salvation is birthed.
What were the descendants of Esau? They were the Edomites, right?
Yeah, correct, which ended up fighting Israel. Continue on. Did you know Herod was Edomite?
Was he?
Yeah, I just preached on it for Christmas.
Oh yeah. I knew
Herod the Great.
I knew that Herod's family. I knew that Herod's family.
He was
converted to Judaism.
Yep, you got it.
So he wasn't wasn't practicing Jewish from birth, but his family converted to Judaism. Yep. But I didn't know he was an Edomite.
Which is fascinating because you'll see the Edomites throughout the Bible be poking at Israel the whole time. And then King Herod ended up trying to kill Jesus when he was a baby. There's another seed war. I preached this cool sermon for Christmas, and I tied Genesis 3:15 to Herod and the seed and the trying to kill the seed. Herod tried to murder all the babies.
Yeah, interesting.
Interesting parallel. Anyway, go ahead. What were you going to say, Jake?
Oh, I was just going to bring that up, what you said about Herod being an Edomite and the fact that he was the guy that went after Jesus when Jesus was born. So
it's so cool.
You keep saying Genesis 15. You mind if I read that?
3:15.
3:15. Yeah, I have it here. This is about God talking about offspring. He says, "And I will cause hostility between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel." And that is talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus. Right. Prophecy.
So that happens right after the fall, Adam and Eve's sin, They hide because they're naked. God looks through the garden. Where are you? Which is fascinating. He says that. And then they said, we were afraid. Well, who told you were naked? They said, we're afraid because we're naked. Who said you were naked? And he said, well, the serpent. So then he goes to Adam. Why'd you eat the fruit? Well, this woman you gave me. And then he goes to Eve. He said, why'd you give the fruit to Adam? And she says, it was the serpent. What's fascinating in that moment is God does not address them after that. I mean, he does. There's consequences right after that verse.
Yeah.
There would be childbearing and working the ground. But before he tells them the consequences, he goes straight to the serpent. I find it fascinating he addresses a serpent first and foremost. Because he's saying you are like, okay, so imagine this. The war in heaven.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever that looks like, it must have been epic. Okay? Combine Lord of the Rings with Star Wars and whatever you want. There was a massive battle. And Satan gets thrown out. Okay? The next time God sees him, he deceived his kids. I'd be pissed.
Yeah. That'd be
I'm like, we're going to have a talk.
Yeah, we're going to have a talk.
Now, God's omniscient. He already knew. But I don't think he's devoid of the emotions. I don't believe God's devoid of emotions. I believe he felt in that moment, you mess with my kids, you mess with me, and I'm sending my son to take care of you.
That's so cool.
And it's cool because the rest of the Bible is Satan trying to figure it out.
Yep.
Because here's the thing. Satan didn't know if it was going to be in 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Or if it's going to be Cain and Eve.
Yeah, he didn't know if it was going to be that. He didn't know if it was going to be Seth.
It makes sense why he goes to Cain.
Yeah.
And, and pokes Cain a little bit. And gets him stirred up. And then he kills Abel.
Yeah.
And then he says, where's your brother? God said.
And then continuing along, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
you're good.
continuing along with the seed wars and quotes, you have right after Jacob, he's got 12 kids after that. He's got 12 sons, 12 for the birthright, which is beautiful because it then goes and they name them all after in Israel, which is awesome.
The book Birthright, you would get a kick out.
Yeah, I want to get it.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. You got to take it with a grain of salt, but it's good.
Yeah.
One thing too that's really fascinating about birthright is like this idea of birthright is so important to the lineage of Christ, but you see over and over and over again how people just mess it up. Because we already talked about Esau selling his birthright for soup,
right?
But then you have Jacob's firstborn. I think it's Reuben.
Yep.
Yes. Reuben.
So he messed up pretty bad, and so all the benefits that would have gone to the Reubenites as the descendants of the firstborn son of Israel were actually got split up and assigned to different tribes.
I didn't realize
That's right. Holy crap. And Joshua talks about that.
Interesting.
No, we're going to spread,
that makes sense.
That's awesome.
So that's why it's almost like the 12 tribes. It's not just the tribe of Reuben.
Yeah.
It's the 12 tribes.
It's the 12 tribes, yeah.
Interesting.
I want to direct it, continuing along with this. I want to read the fall of Lucifer from Isaiah 14:12.
Yeah, do it.
I'm just going to read it. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, which is interesting.
That's
How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, and I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of congregation on the farthest sides of the north. I want to stop there because in Enoch, it actually talks about pillars and how the visions of Enoch and what he has is there's pillars and
when he's in heaven?
When he's it's during the parables. I think it's the
there's
first
a whole scene where he's in heaven.
It's the first parable. I think it's 37 and on, chapter 37 on in First Enoch. He talks about pillars in heaven and how there's one shining and straight up in the middle above all else that goes straight up in the sky.
Okay.
And I thought that was interesting reading that. But I also want to bring in a quote, an opening paragraph from the Birthright book here. It says, and I quote, "If we are to understand our place in the universe, then we must," again, take this with a grain of salt.
Yeah, of course. Right.
Continuing the quote. "If you If we are to understand our place in the universe, then we must surrender our need to be the center of it. Man was not conceived with the universe, and the universe was not created for man. We were born into the cosmos, not with it, thrust into the fray of a complex political, societal, and marital conflict involving incomprehensibly intelligent agencies of exceedingly ancient origin. That's from the book Birthright.
So one of the interesting things Tim Alberino does is he takes the idea of the Watchers or the sons of God, Elohim, but I bet Elohim, and he calls them the elder brother.
Yes.
So he describes them as like, we're the Jacob. They're the Esau.
Yeah, that is interesting.
We got the birthright.
Mm-hmm.
They rebelled, but God kicked him out.
Yep.
So now we have an angry brother.
Yeah.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. I mean, you see that dynamic repeated over and over again, like taking the idea of these sons of God as the elder brother whose birthright got passed down to us. Then you have Jacob and Esau. Then you have the Jews and the Gentiles.
What about Ishmael and Isaac?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
A huge one, dude. That's still going on.
That's right, yeah.
There's another illegitimate firstborn son who's rejected.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still causing havoc with the younger brother. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's all throughout history.
And I want to encourage the people listening out there. It is, yes, we're speculating. Yes, we're doing this. But also remember, if you're going to dive into this, kind of look at it through the viewpoint of Jesus.
There you go.
Tie it back to him. Okay, what does this have to do with Jesus?
Right.
How does it go back to Jesus? How does it go back to the New Testament?
Right.
And what reflects into the Old?
Yep.
And vice versa.